How are you? How are you? Yeah, I'm good. I'm feeling good. Yeah.
Oh, it is. Yeah, 3 hours. But it's worth it. I'm going to try to see him get him out the train. It's just that they leave at weird times. Like, on the way. I don't think so. This is more present than Zach. Yes, I am executive fellow, so I'm a student at Sac State, and I work full time for SGC in addition to attending graduate school. This is a certificate program, so policy.
Okay, cool.
Cool. And then wherever you want to clip that or in a pocket. Or, that should be fine. Cool. And then these are quite tricky. So you want it like super tight around your ear so it doesn't jiggle off. Let's see. So if you don't mind.
Do you want to unloop that?
Oh yeah. That might actually help just to clip to your jacket.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. That worked pretty well actually.
We're good? Where does this guy go?
Let's see.
Whoopsie. I say whoopsie all the time. Do you have kids?
My girlfriend has a 5-year-old.
Yeah,
so
I'm 11-year-olds. I'm constantly like, oh, whoopsie, or we got to go potty.
Yeah. Let's see. There we go. If you want to just tuck the rest of the excess.
How about if I pull this guy down a little bit?
Yeah, if you pull that, that'll be good.
Thank you.
Like that?
Yeah, that's, and then,
Uncomfortable, kind of awkward. You're going to need to adjust it to your ear to fit.
yeah,
You
suppose
wrap
could
this in here?
Hide the slack in there.
To turn it on? Do you guys turn it on, or do I?
Yeah, we'll just leave it on.
It's the best way to do it.
It's on? Like hot mic on?
Yeah.
It really is the only way.
But
I just said potty.
everything's muted for now. Yeah, just so it doesn't
Okay.
talk on anything.
Yeah, you want to put the cable like under your sweater.
Okay, sir.
Great.
Okay.
Looking good.
I'll have the
Thanks.
clip too if you want to use it.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. It might help this too.
Yeah, not all of them have a clip.
Nice. Okay, thank you. By the way, I'm Don.
Don? Ryan.
Ryan, thanks for dressing me. Oh, really?
Yeah.
And the amount of work that, Brazilians and how we're going to handle that. So, yeah. So it's a great plan, and now we're
By the way, I changed all the questions at the last minute. I am going to do, I think, lightning round. What's one thing you wish you had done differently, or what's one thing you hope the audience takes away, or something to that effect? I do think, folks, at least I know, I appreciate vulnerability.
Yeah, no, I agree.
How you feeling?
Good.
Okay, good. Good, you're good.
This is
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. I mean, it's. I'm looking forward to. I much prefer to be an attendee at a conference. It's always such a relief to be like, oh, good. I don't have to sing for my supper. But
I actually have a really easy job this year because I'm here at the beginning. The bar is doing the heavy lifting.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's great. That's great. Yeah. Oh. Well, do you think a lot of folks got caught in traffic? We're good. That's great. That's great.
Right, perfect. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
I don't know if Lois told you. At one point, I was on 7 miles away, and it's at an hour and a half.
Okay, sir, I'm sorry, is that my, I can
Yeah.
move, but
There was some
I'm gonna enjoy
accident
sitting next to you, so.
on 80 that had everybody just stopped.
I think we're
But
on
it
the
worked.
same panel. Are we on the same panel? I'm on the first panel. Are you on?
I'm the keynote.
Oh, you're the keynote. All right.
Oh, yeah.
I heard much about you last night. We were
Yeah.
Yes, we were at the dinner.
Okay,
and,
I think we're good. So
your praises
the
were-
question I was going to ask is,
Yes. Hi.
what's something you can do better, or wish could be done better in
yeah,
the
I can
field?
wait, so,
And I'll probably give
yeah.
everybody like a minute. Yeah. I like not having to answer my questions. How you been?
Thank you
No,
so much.
no pressure,
Oh.
but she did. Yeah. she
No,
really
I'm
did.
happy to.
I did.
And we love the work that's going on. We've been eager to support it, and we hear all the bumps and wrinkles along the way. And
Whenever you do anything worthwhile.
it's funny. Do you know Cecilia Munoz?
Yes.
Yeah. So we were on a call with her, and she said, with a bunch of CEOs, and she said, "You guys in California with surf, California Jobs First, you got it figured out. You know how to do community engagement, and you can teach the rest of the country." And then the call ended, and I went,
Here,
as a nation, because there's a lot still to figure out. So it is, and it's daunting at the same time. And Housing Authority at LA as a government partner. What does flexibility look like in implementing community projects from your vantage point?
Thanks. Is this one working? All right. So flexibility, I think it starts first with understanding that systems are made of humans, and humans are not infallible. And so I think if we start there, then we recognize the importance, the absolute critical importance of flexibility, flexible thinking, and flexible delivery methods. How do we learn? We learn, I would say, you know, I have a couple kids. How have they learned best? Mistakes, right? Mistakes. That's how we all learn. And I feel like it's really important for systems to understand that, right? Local government, state government, federal government, we have to start to understand that it, you know, you cannot put something on paper and expect it to come off paper exactly the same way you put it on paper. And, you know, I will talk about a couple of different levels of flexibility that I think are really important in implementation. The first I call flexible vision. And I'm going to apply this to myself. So I wrote with the community our grant for Watts Rising. And I mean, it was, mwah. I mean, it like on paper, I mean, it won us the grant, right? We did not think that we were going to get in the first cohort. We got in the first cohort. Beautiful ideas. And we talked a lot about community engagement. We talked a lot about our leadership council and how our leadership council was going to operate. We then spent 6 months after receiving the grant setting up that leadership council and debating within our leadership council about, you know, who's on it, who has votes, who doesn't have votes, what are, you know, and at the end of the day, somebody, you know, 5 months into it said, what are we voting on? And they said, didn't you already write the grant? Aren't the projects already funded? What are we voting on? And it was like, oh yeah, you're right. You're right. What are we doing? You know, we have this concept of like, well, you know, this is a community engaged process and it's engaged all the way through. Well, how are we engaging residents? What is their role, right? And let's not tell them that they have a role they don't have. They already voted on the projects they wanted. They got in the grant. Now we're implementing. So, yeah, so I think it's like, oh, okay, there's some flexibility there. We changed our leadership council. We changed our makeup. We changed how we approached the community. We created street teams. We created a CAG, our community advisory group. They're doing different things now. They're being more effective. They're being, you know, they're improving communication to residents. They're doing what they should be doing, not sitting around thinking they're going to vote on something. You know, flexible timelines. And I know that this is something Strategic Growth Council has talked about, you know, is what are we funding and why? And let me tell you, it is easier to fund big projects. You know, as part of our Transformative Climate Communities grant, we had a housing project, and that was one of our cornerstones, was affordable housing. We know how to do affordable housing. I'm a housing authority. So not a problem. That project, I can guarantee you, got off the ground. And, you know, it's being built and it's going to meet its timeline and will close, you know, at the original term of the grant. What else are we funding? A whole lot of other things. You know, a myriad of other projects. Why? Because that is what the community told us they wanted. And I am not going to be the person to stand in front of a room of residents who've received nothing for decades and say, no, we can't deliver on that. Or no, even though that's your top priority, you know, it's too difficult for us to do, so we're just going to put that one on the back burner. I don't know anyone who can say that in front of a room full of residents. Like, if you can, come to Watts. Try it out. Tell me how that works, all right? But I think that that's really important, is like in flexible timelines and in deciding what projects you're doing, you need to, as funders, as implementers, we have to be flexible about what it actually means to get those projects done. Because a lot of them aren't meeting the timelines, and they aren't meeting the budgets. Like, none of them, all right? Like, I'll be honest, like zero. You know, COVID got in the way, you know, I mean, we can't regulate, you know, we don't regulate pricings, we don't regulate, you know, supply, demand. So, you know, it all changes from the day you write that grant, from the day you get that award, it all changes. In fact, it changed for us. Funny story, when we got our grant, we applied for $35 million, and we were awarded $35 million. And then the Strategic Growth Council came back to us a month or two later and said, hey, by the way, we're actually only going to give you 33.25. I said, well, your announcement, your press release says we're getting $35 million, and you told us to write a grant for $35 million. And they're like, yeah, we know, but you know what, that 5% for admin, that wasn't for you, that's for us. So we have to take that 5% back, and now you got to figure out how to make 33.25 work for you and your community and still deliver on the exact same stuff that you told us you were going to deliver on. So it's like flexible timelines. Okay, so if you start to throw roadblocks get thrown in, then let's start to be flexible as grantors, as implementers about our expectations on how we're going to get projects done. And let's also not turn the tables on the community and and say, you didn't meet the timeline, so sorry, that walking club you couldn't do during COVID, and now you're spending that money and you're trying to get that walking club done. Well, you know what? We're at time. Grant's over. You're not going to be able to spend all that money. You're not going to be able to get that walking club, to its end. So it's like those are the things that we have to be thinking about. Those are the things we bring up to SGC every day. Those are the things SGC and we deal with and talk through and try to work together on every day. So I think that that's really important. Flexible management. As an implementer, I have to be honest, like all of our partners need very, very different levels of contact, engagement, and support, capacity building. That's been talked about already today. So for some, it's diversity training. We have some folks who are partners that are in the community and some folks that are coming from outside the community. So those who are coming outside the community, where do they need some help? They need some help with diversity training. Where do the people in our community need help? Accounting, and paperwork and data reporting. So those are the things we have to be careful about and think about. Lastly, I think flexible funding, and this is a big one. I give out grants as much as I accept grants, right? We're a bit of a middleman here on TCC, and flexible funding is really important from the question of what are you funding and how are we funding. So what are we funding? And I thank SGC for this because they let us spend money on food, but a lot of grants don't, right? A lot of grants say, hey, do a ton of community engagement and bring people out to meetings every week, and but no, you can't spend our money on food, and you can't spend our money on gift cards, and you can't spend our money on water. And it's like, okay, so how am I going to get folks in these communities out? Like, are you kidding me? So, I think it's things like that that we have to be cognizant of. Just simple things like that are really important to getting something from being built to actually being used, right? Or from something coming out as like, hey, I can give you a roof that has solar on it, to people actually accepting that roof with solar on it, right? Because they're like, you know what, like, I don't trust you, I don't know you, I'm gonna need some time to get to know you and get to know this process. So those are really important things that I think we all have to remember. So I think, in terms of solutions, I say to those that are implementing tenacity, be like water. I use that philosophy all the time. I said, I am water, so you know what? Water always flows. It will find a way. You can put all kinds of rocks up, you can put all kinds of barriers up. It's gonna find its way through. Cement, it'll find its way through over time. So be like water. Just keep pushing, asking questions, making mistakes, learning from your mistakes. For us, for grantors, figure out how to say yes. No is so much easier, no is safe, but how do you get to yes? And I hope that we talk a lot about that in our future sessions during the next 2 days.
Hey, thanks, Jenny. I want to put a pin in your point about authentic community engagement, because we can come back to that as a group question. But now I want to turn to Clare. How, at BlocPower, how do you demonstrate fidelity to communities and prioritize community voice and ownership while navigating the complexities of implementation? It's quite a question.
There we go.
That's my authentic voice. So, yeah, BlocPower was founded in 2014. We are a Black-owned company based in Brooklyn, New York. We focus on building decarbonization in low and moderate income communities across the United States. And we do our work by working really through partners in every community that we work in. And what does that look like, and why is that authentic? What does that do for our voice and our project execution? Because project execution is exactly what BlocPower does. We don't do building decarbonization by asking someone else to do it. We do it by having an engineering team, a construction team. We partner with implementers on the ground. But if we did that work without engaging the community, it would not be a community transformation, an energy transformation, a just 40 transformation. So BlocPower does that work by working with, in the cities where we work, we set up community advisory boards, working with cities and community leaders, faith-based organizations, and we set an agenda of kind of how are we going to achieve building decarbonization in this city. And then we also have done that in California in cities where we're working in San Jose, and San Luis Obispo, and other communities. We also look at authentic community engagement by taking, you know, to Doria's point, a little bit of a wider perspective. What is building decarbonization, and who cares about it? Well, the residents who live there, who oftentimes are in a place where there's antiquated fossil fuel systems, where there's social determinants of health that are negative outcomes of building of those antiquated systems, so chronic asthma, for example. And so in Denver, we have a community advisory board. We've pulled in the health system as part of our problem to solve for. So these community organizations and health systems are working together to pair how can building decarbonization advance health outcomes that reduce asthma, that reduce childhood school absenteeism, workplace, you know, absences that are caused by these antiquated systems in old fossil fuel buildings. The other way that we have authentic voice at BlocPower is through intention about the building segments that we work in. We purposely choose difficult projects, old, leaky, multifamily buildings that are not easy, they're complex, they cost a lot of money. We have to pull in a lot of partners to do this work. We could achieve speed and scale if we pursued a different market, a different type of building. But that is not going to achieve our goals, which is greening healthier buildings across the country for all. And so what we have done in that work is we look to engage and arm the folks who are working in our engineering community, our engineering team, our construction team, by having those folks understand they're not just an engineer, but they have to also understand about community voice, community organizing. So for example, our company had a company-wide retreat that was focused entirely on community organizing. We brought in community organizing leaders from the New York City area who do this work every single day. And we did, similar to this conference, we did breakout sessions. We heard each other as team members of our company and really learned about community voice, community organizing as we execute our work every single day, because a lot of our folks are accountants or they're engineers, but if they're not listening to community as they're doing those types of functions, it's really a little bit moot. One of the other ways that we really have looked to have authentic voice and community engagement is by using data and tech as part of our solution process. So for example, we have something called block maps, where we have mapped the entire building stock of the United States for single family properties, multifamily properties, small commercial properties. What is a mapping, what does that mean for community and community voice? Well, what it means is that in a city like San Luis Obispo, the Community Advisory Board is able to understand their building stock. You can overlay Justice 40 communities in that stock. You can look at chronic asthma as part of the data set, and you can identify buildings that would be the buildings that are best suited for building decarbonization. Okay, so then that list exists just like in a data and mapping database, but unless you're pulling in, going back to the Community Advisory Board, having the Community Advisory Board understand the data. It's up on something like this, a big screen, or in their Community Advisory Board meetings, and understanding, okay, what are these buildings that are best suited for building decarbonization? Maybe it's part of the Housing Authority. So let's connect with the Housing Authority. Maybe it's part of, for example, the Community Development Corporation of a certain neighborhood. They're not at the table. They're not in this Community Advisory Board, so let's have a big tent. Let's look at all the properties that have chronic asthma and bring in the healthcare folks into this meeting and look at this map, understand these buildings, and you can address your issue of kind of having frequent flyers of kids who are going into, the emergency room by targeting 5 buildings as part of a project. So we leverage data and mapping software as part of our solution, but we don't just hold on to that. That is part of the community-driven solution that engages voices as part of the solution set. The other way that I think that is important to note is that we have partnered with philanthropy in a unique program called our Clean Energy Program Associates, and we've brought in some folks who are new to the energy space. They're young people who are excited about energy transition, and they are focused really on community organizing. So we have, with intention, embedded a lot of these processes within our company. So that doesn't, you could say, well, is that slowing you down? No, it's not, because as the pastor mentioned, this is not just a transition that's time-bound for a certain period of time. It is about an economic development, ripple effect for decades to come, where kind of the community is coming together, but it's also vested in ownership and kind of having the community as part of the solution, not just an implementation partner that comes in and executes and then leaves. So this is a lot of the way that BlocPower lives and breathes our work. It is attributed, I would say, to the vision of our CEO, Donnell Baird, who, was a community organizer earlier in his career in New York City. He worked with the unions, worked on political campaigns, was a community organizer, knocking on doors and walking block by block. That lived experience really kind of set the basis and the vision for our company, and I work hard to try and live up to those ideals.
Thanks, Claire. We have about 10, yes. I'm moving fast. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to pose one question for the group and then one lightning round, if we could try to do it. So I'm struck as a funder at the Irvine Foundation of grassroots and community-based organizations, how challenging it is both to meet the moment with the time at which the resources are coming available in order to organize to be able to really direct those resources. I'm also struck by, as a last count I heard, was 90 new funding programs between the state and the feds. Every one of those programs, and maybe many of your projects, are trying to engage the community. Well, if you're a community-based organization and you're asked to go to 90 town halls, how the hell are you going to do it? So I'm proud of a group of California funders who've set up the Community Economic Mobilization Initiative, which is a fund to build capacity of grassroots organizations to add a person, to have the technical skills to be able to sit at those tables and hold their own. But I'd love to hear from you all, maybe an example or two, if you could, of how project implementers have tried to collaborate to reduce those 90 different events into a smaller number of community engagement exercises. If there's 90, there's nothing, because effectively there's no authentic community engagement. So anybody who has an example, I'd love to hear.
I'll jump in really quick. So in Richmond, one of the things that a group of organizations did was form an alliance. It's the Richmond Our Power Coalition. It's a collection of organizations that have been doing work in Richmond for decades, like Asian Pacific Environmental Network, Communities for a Better Environment, and then a bunch of Richmond-based organizations like Richmond Land, Urban Tilth, Rich City Rides. And we work together to form those community groups, do those community meetings. So not each one of our organizations have to have our own meetings working with the same people who are tired of coming out and answering the same questions and doing the same surveys. So we collect that stuff together. And collectively, we created that community vision, that North Star constellation of stars, really, that we're working towards. When grants come up, we already have a set of dream projects that we do not have funding for, that we can pick from, and we've already vetted them, we've already worked through them, we've already done those things. So having that format of the coalition allows us to not have to go to 90 meetings, right? One more thing with that, one of the things we did recently with really forward-thinking funders was create a Just Transition Fund through a fiscally sponsored project, the East Bay Community Foundation, which we command as a coalition. So we can direct funding, small sets of funding, depending on what's in the fund, to fund small pilot projects and get things off the ground while we wait for bigger funds. That's another key part of the success of the Richmond Our Power Coalition.
Love those examples. Anybody? Alvaro, maybe? You have one?
Yeah, absolutely. We noticed this coming through. We noticed the opportunity, the size, the complexity of it, and we understood that there was going to be communities that were just not going to be ready, that were not going to have the opportunity to do this work. So we launched a program called Greenlining the Block. Greenlining the Block is working with 24 partners in California, Colorado, Illinois, Virginia, North Carolina, and Michigan to get ready for the moment, and for us to deliver the services that they need in order to be able to take advantage of these resources. George Lee up here is the director of Greenlining the Block, and Emmy Wang back there is the director of our capacity building team. And I mentioned both of them because we're doing two things. We're helping our partners develop shovel-ready proposals, getting projects to 30% development stage so that they can be competitive for public and private funding. But at the same time, we're working with them to build power, to be able to be immersed in the policy development part of the work so that they can, in the future, be able to work with us, to be able to do the work to eliminate some of these barriers that we're talking about. But the level of service delivery that's involved in Greenlining the Block is so intensive and is so kind of long-term. We've committed to be in these communities for a minimum of 5 years, to work with our partners for a minimum of 5 years, and to be able to fund our partners to do the hiring, the consulting, the coaching for those number of years. So we're always looking for partners to help us fund this work because it's extremely expensive. But that's the level of commitment that those communities need in order to be able to meet the moment in the future years.
Thanks, Alvaro. Now I'm told I have 5 minutes left. We have 5 minutes left. There are 4 folks on the panel. A lightning round. If you can answer one question, you've each got like a minute. What is something you wish could be done better in the field of project implementation to ensure community engagement and authentic community ownership and power in these projects? I'll start with Claire. Is that cruel? Sorry.
Yeah, actually, I think, information is power. When you mentioned shovel-ready projects, they don't just appear. It is years in the making and years of education, community understanding of what that project is. But that is a little, I'm not answering, actually, I'm not adhering to your rules. So, I did, so kind of identifying these projects, it's a little bit against some of the federal procurement rules that are going to be coming down for the home energy rebates, with GGRF, where there is this drive towards implementation, towards standing up projects, towards getting things done. There is this incredible focus on waste, fraud, and abuse. So those are kind of some of the push factors. But how do you achieve, the authenticity in that? And I think it's through, these engagements, these coalition buildings, and really kind of identifying specific objectives and tying the purpose of the coalition building to, with all these gating factors around identifying those projects and getting them up.
Okay, I'm going to turn to Doria.
Say it quick. So for me, communications through project implementation. Projects take longer than you think. The community never knows, never understands scale and length of projects. We need to change the timeline in community members' minds, and then we need to have a better communication strategy that's frequent, that's consistent, that is two-way, so that people are informed and involved all along the process, even when you're waiting for implementation because you haven't gotten quite into contract and you haven't got, there needs to be a way to keep the community informed so there isn't, terrible feelings that get developed or new people who come in and they don't know what the hell this project is and they didn't vote for it and blah, 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 blah. So communication.
Thanks. And Jenny.
I would say, I think that we have street teams and we have one-on-one engagements with the community. You have to, I don't think I need to tell anyone here who's in the community-based organizations or who are implementers how to get authentic communication going. It's particularly in the communities that we work in, it requires you to meet people where they're at. You cannot ask them to come to meetings. You cannot ask them to be regular attendees. Even if you're doing it on a weekend or a night. So it's just not going to happen and it's not going to be consistent. So you need to door knock. And so you really have to broaden your communication strategy. There is not a one size fits all, and it is a neighbor to neighbor. So I think that, the community health worker, the promotora, the street team approach is probably the strongest approach for creating, trusting communication so that messages actually get heard. Because I can stand in front of a group of people and say something, and it's probably gobbledygook. It's like, they're not listening to me, and they don't trust me probably half the time. So, their guard is up, and they're hearing something very different than what I'm saying. But if I have a neighbor, who's conveying to another neighbor what's going on and this new program or project that they can actually, that actually benefits them, they're going to listen, and they might actually participate. So, yeah, I think that is absolutely critical. I think grantors have to understand that and understand that's a very expensive model of engagement. And so, holding to very specific percentages of amounts of grants that can go into engagement versus improvements, I think is destructive to that ability to actually get good communication going and really see the ripple effects of it.
Great. Over to you, Alvaro. We have -1 minute to make
Negative 1 minute. Okay. I will make up time. I wish we had been building capacity all along, and I hope we don't stop trying to build capacity after 1 or 2 years. So that's something we should have definitely done. We also don't have a private capital strategy. We're not going to fund this out of public sector. We need private capital to come into the game and to come into the game strong. We're not nearly coordinating or aligning enough, and we're not learning enough. And I feel like we need to learn to be able to improve the conditions moving forward. And the last thing is, we need to tell a better story of what's happening. Like, people need to know what changes are happening, and people need to be inspired by what happened in Fresno, by what's happening in Watts, by what's happening in Richmond, and we're not telling a good enough story to be able to demonstrate what the future can look like.
Thanks. And let me answer my own questions real briefly. If I could take the privilege, I want to double down on the capacity building piece. I think that's got to be private philanthropic resources, but also public resources. So a call to all of the funders in the room to prioritize capacity building for grassroots organizations. That's point one. And the other I'd say is we all have to be advocates for more funding for the next round and the next round, because some of this capacity building is not going to be done for this round, but we're going to continue to have to invest in our infrastructure, in climate change. So keep fighting for greater funding. I want to encourage folks to tap into these speakers. They have a ton of experience, as you can tell. Ask them for help. Ask them to hear you and what you might advise them to do. And I want to thank everybody in the room for coming and joining us for the panel. Thank you all.
All right, thank you so much for that panel. I think, again, it helps to really ground us in our conversations this morning and for the rest of our space and time over the next couple of days. A couple of things I heard, reminding ourselves to check in with our community. We all have privilege to be in this space. We have privilege in the positions that we're in. Let's recognize that. Let's bring in community, our partners, so that their voices are heard. their lived experiences are valued, and then we're telling the better story, we're telling their stories, we're allowing space and creating space for them to also tell their stories. So thank you again for that reminder. A couple of logistics before we transition. We're gonna have about a 5-minute break to stretch, bio breaks to move. We ask that you return promptly back to this room so that we can get into our next panel, which is our tribal panel session up on stage. As a reminder, exits to the back, to my right, your left. We will have some water out there, take a bio break, take a stretch. We have some pins that you all received this morning. We have hexagon, nope, we're not doing that. Okay, we're moving on. We're just gonna actually take a break right now. Please stretch, please connect. Come back promptly to this room.
checking, mic check. 2 1, check 1 2, check 1 2, check 1, check 2, microphone check. Check, mic check, 2 1, huh? Yeah, okay, we're seeing it, but we're not hearing it in the house, so we can see the levels going through now. Check 2, check 1, check 2, check 1, 1 2, 1 2. All right, check mic check 1. 2, check 1, mic 1, check 2, mic 1, check 2. I think I hear. Hold on, check 1, check 2, mic 1, check 2, mic 1, check 1, check 1, check 2, check 1, check 2. Microphone check, audio system test audio system, testing, microphone test. Testing, audio system test, That's through the system that he has back there. Test 1, test 2. Test 1, 2. Yeah? Test 1, 2. Check 1, 2. You hear us. You hear me? Can you talk? No, we don't hear you. Test 1, test 2. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test 2, 1. 2, 1. Yeah. So it's something in the house. Are you sure it's not how the house is routed back here? No, that's undone. How is it redone though? With audio out of this going into here. Wait, they can hear it. Yeah. They can hear me. Yeah. Yeah. For everything, the room now.
No, the room is lining up now.
Test 1, test 2. Test. Test 1.
In Indian country, she has begun successfully to taking opportunities and conception of projects through completion, from application phase to funding to construction, administration, and certificate of occupancy. And then Shelby Ray, who is with Indigenized Energy. Shelby utilizes their deep understanding of cultural differences and collaborative approaches to foster meaningful connections, bridging gaps and promoting mutual beneficial partnerships between organizations and Indigenous community. Let's give a collective welcome. Thank you.
Mic check. Mic check. Is this working? Y'all hear me? I'm saying nice. All right. Sorry. Okay, we're going to have fun today. It's not a conference without any tech issues, right? So thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is the panel to talk about challenges and opportunities for our tribal projects. I'm Iliana Chevez. I'm the TA provider at California Coalition for Rural Housing. Been working with tribes with them for statewide to go after state funding to do primarily their housing projects. And you already have heard some of those challenges that other non-tribal communities have. Those exist with our tribal communities as well. Is there some static? Y'all looking at that thing up there, huh? Okay. I just want to start off that just recognizing that we are all on Native land. Wherever you visit, wherever you live, wherever you reside and work, it has and is ancestral land of your local tribe. Here in Sacramento, this is the homelands of the Miwok, Maidu, and Nisenan people, and the home of the only federal recognized tribe, Wilton Rancheria. So I would encourage you all to educate yourselves on your local tribes, only because we are the outcomes of our educational system, and our educational system told us that they just basket weed back in the days and left it there. They're very much present here with us today. They are very much resilient and working towards meeting the needs of their tribal members. And so we have a very great panel with us today to touch on the types of projects that they've gone, the types of challenges that they've encountered, and the very creative solutions that they've encountered in order to overcome those obstacles. So with that, sorry, I was trying to see if Annalie and Moriah were behind me, but they're not. But I'm sure that they're around. So we'll start off with President Ortega. You are the head of your tribal government, and I'm sure you've had lots of experience dealing with other governments, state governments, local, whether that be county or city. What would you say would be the best practice when it comes to tribal government relationships with other government relationships? What should those state and county and city try to do in order to improve that relationship with tribal governments?
Thank you for that. Again, my name is Rudy Ortega Jr. For me, and the experience that I have gone through in leadership, even working with my father and other council members of our tribe, is the existence. And the first parts of the counties, city, state, and federal agencies and departments and so on, as we just talked about land acknowledgement, that's the essence of the beginning communications of understanding the tribe's existence. The fact that there are tribal nations there, tribal people that are there, and the work that the people are needing in the services. My tribe is in Los Angeles County. We're still yet to receive federal acknowledgement. We have the only tribe in LA County that's petitioning through the Bureau of Indian Affairs to get federal acknowledgement. So we understand the roadblocks, the absence, and the avoidance from governments. And so what started off really for us to really grow is that communication. And my father believed really wholeheartedly to engage, let people know that we're here in existence, and let folks know that our community is thriving still and still need all the services and programs. So one thing that we've done is collaborate outside of county and state agencies, but with nonprofit and organizations and businesses to really grow our community. And then with that, we're able to go back to the counties. And so my tribe was one of the first in LA County to work with cultural resources with the county to allow us to have mitigations and processes in it. So those are the things that really gives us the tools and the essence of an existence. And without that, so when we talk about land acknowledgement, it's the practice of listening and inviting the tribes to the table to have meaningful conversations, not just consultation, but outcomes that find solutions to grow and empower the communities, both tribal community and non-tribal community. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to kind of also preface this in case some of you all do not know. Tribes are recognized political organizations through federal law. So there has to be a different approach to that to other communities of color. There is this level of hierarchy now, of level of respect that should come for tribal governments. That's what President Ortega was kind of touching on, that there is this lack of acknowledgement of them as a government structure. And so there is this intention of like, oh, well, they're like any other rural community or urban community out there, you know, why is their need even greater? Well, history is going to tell us that they're that the government, federal and state, had a very strong hand in impacting the tribal communities that we have now, and shape them the way that they have now, and put them in a place where they are now. So we have to be very cognizant of that part, that they are tribal governments, and they have that structure, and we have to respect that and approach it in that way. So the next question, are we taking? Okay, I'll get you though. Next question will be for Moriah. So I just want to take a quick sound check on that. Moriah, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Yay! Technology's on our side today. Okay. So Moriah, as a grant analyst for Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority, I'm sure you've had your fair share of going after funding, private and state kind of programs. What are the barriers that you have encountered in going to either the state or private funding that has really impacted on the type of projects that you can implement, or the type of projects that have, resulted in not having enough resources for your people?
Great question. Thank you. So Northern Circle is a tribal designated housing entity. So we carry out housing on behalf of 8 federally recognized tribes. That means 8 individual tribal governments that we work together with. We've been successful in bringing in approximately $60 million over the last 5 years, and those have been really structured around COVID. I think COVID really opened a lot of doors of funding that we had never had access to before. So we had access to the Emergency Solutions Grant, coronavirus, through the California Department of Housing and Community Development. Same with home key dollars, and the U.S. Department of Treasury had opened up avenues for emergency rental assistance program and the homeowners assistance program. So what was beautiful about that is that it was the first time that these funding sources that historically and traditionally only served nonprofits and local governments, but they gave tribes finally an opportunity to be successful in their programs. And I believe that it is allowing other funding sources to realize that tribes have been here since the beginning of time. We've been housing developers. We've been supporting our communities through homeless mitigation, through a plethora of programs. And it is time, and we are grateful for the time to actually be able to access these funds. Many of the barriers that come around the state programs and even our philanthropic funds as well is that there's potentially a misconception that every tribe is a gaming tribe and every gaming tribe has these giant mansions. There is still the same issues that we see. There's still a need for affordable housing, regardless of whether or not the tribe is gaming. There's still a huge need for energy sovereignty, right? There's a huge need for food sovereignty, and we saw that during the pandemic when food was wiped off shelves. One of the things that really sparked me in thinking about this panel discussion today is we're looking at challenges and opportunities. We represent Northern Circle, very rural tribes, to the point where I couldn't even get to Sacramento because of the weather, because of the road conditions. So seeing more government funds for infrastructure, for strengthening our communities to respond to natural disaster, that's really needed, and we hope for it in the years to come.
Thank you, Moriah. I want to put that same question to Annalie, Ms. Trujillo from Paula Housing Resource Center. I know that you've also gone after federal funding, state funding, and also local funding. What have been the barriers that you've experienced to implement the programs that you run in your Paula Housing Resource Center?
Good morning. Well, we've come across all sorts of barriers when trying to access funding through the state. First, I just want to talk about for a minute that the tribes here were the first people, and the tribes were the first people to be homeless by action of the state. So basically by relocation, termination, and removal. So the tribes were moved relocated into places where it's pretty much, in areas that are non-buildable, or we have very little land to build upon. Some tribes have no land. So while the tribes were removed, relocated, and terminated, and basically fending for themselves, because there was a system created of exclusion and not inclusion. And it's really nice now for the state to have programs for the tribe and for other, folks that have monies that are set aside for the tribe, for the tribes to thrive, because the tribes had sat back for decades watching, developers and cities grow and thriving off our own land that we once had, while the tribes were always pretty much not even a thought. So now that we're at the table, it's really important to understand the tribes and how tribes operate. And I think one of the foremost things that is a barrier is lack of education on the state side and on, federal side on, how tribes operate, how tribes were created, what, tribes are, why tribes are located where we're located today, and basically our cultural part of it with our people. And until you can understand that, it's a little bit difficult for these programs to work for tribes, because tribes, they have these programs, but the tribes are trying to fit into a program they don't fit in because the programs were not made for tribes. One of the barriers is, it'd be 3 miles within amenities. Income is still critical for us because, even though some tribes might have, gaming, we don't have the funds to take care of our housing needs. Every tribe has a housing need. It doesn't matter if you're from a gaming tribe or a non-gaming tribe, we all have some sort of need. And I think by visiting the tribes, it was an eye opener on the state side, we had hosted tribal housing roadshows. And that for us was something big when the state came in and they wanted to participate, and others came in and wanted to participate. So the barriers that we still encounter are, pretty much not understanding tribal government, not understanding that we govern ourselves, but then again, to include us with the state programs and remove those barriers so tribes can access those funds is what we're advocating for. There's, we've identified several barriers. We have a bill, AB 371, that was vetoed. It's being reintroduced as AB 1878, I believe. And that in itself will explain, all the barriers that we've encountered and how we are trying to remove those barriers so the tribes can successfully access funding throughout the state of California, because we all need the funds.
Thank you for that plug for that bill. So there are some tribal housing bills that CCRH partnered with Paula in Northern Circle and multiple other tribes are pushing through and asking for the governor to support. We had SB 18 and AB 371 that were intended to, 1, create a tribal housing program, and then 2, remove these barriers. And we got anonymous support through the Assembly, through the Senate. No one vetoed it. No one had opposition. We got to the governor's desk, and he vetoed it. So now we're going back to the table asking, what is that the governor's looking for? What can we do? And so we are circling back with everything that we can do by pushing AB 1878 and getting more of that attention of there is a critical need to our tribal communities, to our tribal governments. Just like Moriah had mentioned earlier, the atmospheric river that we all got through, and I'm sure some of you all experienced, the heavy winds, the gush of rain, that impacted her and Annalie, who are in the very much rural areas of California, and they couldn't even come to a conference. Now imagine having them to implement their programs to outreach to their people who live in all sectors of their rural area, whether that be the mountain, the forest, the desert, the plains. And so we are all here to understand what role we can take here to help them, or along with them, in getting this funding, getting this exposure, and educating others who haven't heard about tribes. Because again, we are all outcomes of our educational system, and our educational system has definitely left tribal governments out. So I know we talked about a lot of barriers, and hope that gives you kind of a glimpse. We can definitely get into a whole session and workshops on all that, but we do not have the time for that today. But I am glad to continue talking about it. Next question for you, Shelby. You work for an organization that engages with these tribal communities with indigenized energy in implementing projects around energy, but definitely around tackling climate change with indigenous communities. Could you share a little bit of your experience of what has been a successful strategy in implementing those projects with tribal governments? Quick pause. Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Bonjour, Indigenous cause, standing alone, white plume woman, Mikanakawaju, Ishinabe Yushkugen. Hello, my name is Shelby Keplin. I'm an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians. My homelands are in Belcourt, North Dakota. It is a privilege to be here on the panel today to discuss this. Having served in various capacities, including roles in social services, human services, housing director, food sovereignty, and now my focus lies in energy sovereignty. As a tribal relations specialist with Indigenized Energy, I work closely with tribal nations, handling all communications in the aspect of tribal matters. My passion lies in bridging the gaps of sustainable energy solutions with tribal communities. And today we gather to discuss the projects or the challenges and opportunities of the tribal project implementation that is close to my heart. Through collaborative efforts, I believe we can navigate these obstacles and unlock the immense potential that lies within our communities. The first thing that Indigenized Energy does is we help set goals with tribal nations. We understand, we spend a great deal of time with these tribal communities to understand their history and the goals that they set for themselves. In many cases, we help them develop and energy transitions and also prioritize the projects. We know the big picture. Too often, the funding opportunities drive action, and we help those tribes and those communities with long-term energy plans to guide the types of projects that they want to pursue. We look for tribes' best interest. Sometimes tribes don't know what the best interest is for themselves, so we help them develop long-term plans and help them guide and pursue those projects. For example, we have ways that can have ownership to their own renewable energy projects on their own homelands. We make sure that they have capabilities in place to deliver. Also, when they don't have capacity to manage a project or a program, we can help them actually get the projects done and help them to be successful. We're gonna borrow this. We're gonna have communal microphones. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Shelby, and thank you for the mic. I think it's great to hear. It's one way that one organization is engaging with tribes nationwide. I wanna put this question to you, President Ortega. You said, the first step is to create awareness of your tribe that is near you, in learning about their history, right? Once a state representative or a city council member is already at that stage, what would you say is a successful strategy in engaging with that tribe, consulting with the tribe, in pushing in or implementing a project with the tribe? Are we sharing? Are we sharing?
Can you hear me?
Okay.
I think for us, the experience that we've had on successfulness of a project is working with elected officials. Is once we get past that barrier of them knowing who we are, and that's the biggest part. For my tribe, we're kind of lost in the sense that many people don't know who we are. There's other bands like Chumash and Gabrielino that overshadow us. So we're right in the middle of those two bands that get really acknowledged and informed and so on. So for us to tell our stories, we got to let them know. As one time I had a conversation with one of the board of supervisors in Los Angeles, we're 175 years behind state of California as tribes. And as that, you know, the U.S. government spends money, I'm going to get a little political, across seas versus our own infrastructure here in the United States. And for the first peoples, the First Nations, as far as us, we haven't seen really the structure. We've been passively awarded. Some tribes, federal acknowledgement, in-house services, many other programming. But for us, we haven't. And so for us, the successful part is once we have that communication with elected officials, we are engaging in community. We worked with the city of San Fernando. We brought in a youth diversion program of $1 million that we're working with community youth in the city, both tribal and non-tribal people. We're working on our first housing project in the city of San Fernando of 27 units in the LA County. So we're not stopping at all, and that's the first accomplishment of working with our city councils, elected officials, and organizations. Along with that, the other successful part we have is that we recently acquired 564 acres that was donated to us privately. So we're continuing to grow and expand, and it's exciting to see that and to have the elected officials who support us and believe in us now and willing to sit down and listen to our story as we tell it and let them know that we're in existence and that we're here and we have a tribal government and we have our people. We recently created, and you can go to our tribe's website, tataviam.us, a resilient plan that we work with our tribal community. That plan covers in our tribal ancestral boundary lines what our people are going to face in the next 10, 20 years as we warm, get hotter. And making sure that our tribal people that live in these counties and cities have efficient electricity to ensure that the ACs are running during the hottest day of the year. So we have to be innovative and creative to work beyond our barriers and the walls. So our tribe, my tribe, what we did is we created 5 entities. We created 3 nonprofits, 2 for-profit organizations to meet the demand and to move forward our tribal communities, because we couldn't wait for the federal government to give us federal acknowledgement. We had to do it ourselves. So that's a successful part, is working with the local city, county governments who believe in us and they champion with us on the success path.
Thank you, President Ortega. You definitely touched on a lot of things that have been barriers for a lot of tribes. You touched on like the federal recognition process, which it can be controversial in of itself, where the federal government is the one kind of providing these privileges and powers for tribes that have inherent sovereignty and were here way before the U.S. government was created. And so how can they be the one providing and recognizing that, right? And so then now we have non-federally recognized tribes, and I know that Fernando Tataviam was one of those that got their recognition pulled away back in the days, along with other tribes. So we have to learn how to maneuver through these past policies, right? And then you touched on land back. I know maybe some of you have heard of this land back movement, and it is coming and growing. But I think what you're saying is like, well, listen to a tribe first on what they want to do with that land and respect their self-determination to do what they want to do with that land. Because again, we are all on native land. I know I only have 5 minutes, but I wanted to touch back on like technical assistance, because I'm one of them, but I definitely want to give more of that perspective to the tribes who are receiving that technical assistance. So Moriah or Annalie, I guess I'll pitch it over to Annalie. What has been a successful approach to technical assistance, and what changes would you recommend to the current structure of technical assistance?
My recommendation was to be providing the tribe with the capacity so the tribes can provide their own technical assistance to our people. So often, we're relying on outside sources that have little or no knowledge to tribes, to our cultural aspects of our tribes, our government, how our government's created, how our governments works, how our tribes work. So for the most part is we find ourselves as professionals not being utilized in the ways that we should be utilized because we know what our own people need. And then we find ourselves providing technical assistance to our TA providers to then provide technical assistance back to us or to other tribes. So we as professionals really suggest that you look for us, look to us for that input. Look to us to do, and empower us. Why aren't we empowering ourselves to do this, to provide technical assistance? Those are the things that I see as a need, and also just a clear understanding and a sensitive approach to tribes. Most times we're kind of treated like we don't know what we're doing, like we're not professionals, like we don't have experience, like we're not developers, and we're just Indians. And that's one of the things that is respect, I think, and also learning the history and approach. So those are really important for us. And I think, just to use us and to look at us as professionals as well.
Thank you so much, Annalie. We have to wrap up this panel soon. I know we're all we're looking forward to the lunch that we have coming up for us here. So I just want to thank Moriah and Annalie for being so flexible and jumping on Zoom and dedicating and being able to make sure that they're online and present here with us. So I want to just give them a quick shout out to them, even though I don't see them, they're here. And I also want to deeply, deeply show my appreciation to Shelby and President Ortega for being here, flying from where you're coming, and being here on these lands for this panel and showing your experience on all this. And hopefully, y'all learn some things about how to engage, truthfully and genuinely and respectfully engage with the tribes and moving forward. And so any last words, any things you want to close up with?
I would like to personally invite all of you to our Indigenized Energies presentation following lunch. This panel discussion is about supporting tribal energy sovereignty. So please come and visit with us and ask us some questions. Thanks, everybody.
That's working? I don't know. Don't know anymore.
I know. It's okay.
I just want to encourage you to go to our tribe's website, Tataviam, TATAVIAM.us, and then download our climate resiliency plan, so you can take a look at the work that we've done and the many work that we're doing further. So there's many stuff on our website.
He has a copy over there. Well, thank you so much. Hope you enjoy your lunch and enjoy the rest of SGC's Catalyst Conference. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
All right, y'all. Thank you again for our tribal panel. I also want to recognize Iliana. Thank you. I didn't recognize you earlier. She's done great work around the state, so please give it up for Iliana. I think, again, we're hearing those reminders to recognize the people that are here, that have been here, recognizing their sovereignty always. Keep that in mind when we're doing any type of work. And if you are hearing this for the first time, please educate yourself on our tribal communities that have been here. We're not gone, they're not gone. And find solutions that work for our tribal communities, work for tribal people. find ways to really check your own organizations and bolster those commitments. We're far behind on the work that we should be doing already. We're about to have lunch. We shifted a couple of things, so we're just moving things back about 10 minutes. So we will have about 50 minutes for lunch. If you are a panel or panelist right after lunch, please make sure your needs are met and get to the lunch line first. If you're not, please take a little bit of a step back and allow folks to get their needs met early in this space. I'll also ask that as you're having lunch, please connect with each other, especially if you haven't met somebody, introduce yourselves, and then also engage with some of our content outside. We have some hexagons, pins. Put yourself on the pin board on our mapping system. Find ways to connect. We have a lot of that information in our Whova app. If it doesn't make sense, find one of us to check in. That's the interactive space after this. And then right after lunch, we will have some panels. We have 2 panel sessions that we're going to be running back to back. The first one will have 4 sessions that you can choose which to engage in. You will have an option to engage in the first session. We'll have a quick break. We'll switch into the next one. Those will be running back to back, so you will be able to cover 2 of the 4 in that session. The second one will follow right after that. Same concept where you have an ability to select from 4 sessions. You'll be able to go through one. They'll be running at the same time. Next one will start. You'll have the ability to jump onto the next one. So think about that. All of the information is in the Whova app. You'll have some fact sheets on what those panels look like, and so you can have an ability to check in there. And again, find ways to connect, find ways to network, and let's keep this movement going. Thank you. Break for lunch.